Hi, and welcome to Lesson 20 in our 26th lesson program entitled Leadership at the Points of Contact. In this section of the program, we're focusing on the third key leadership role, which is to facilitate continuous process improvement, or as I refer to it, the relentless search for better ways. And if you'll look at the graphic on your screen, you'll see the 4 steps in my model: to deliberate, decide, implement, and improve. One of the things we've concluded from previous lessons is that collaborative process, such as the relentless search for a better way, don't just happen. Somebody's got to facilitate those processes, and I don't guess at this point I have to tell you that somebody is you. Step 1 in the process that we discussed in our last lesson is deliberate. And one of the points I wanted to make about deliberate before we move on to today's step, which is decide, one more point about deliberation. It's done in support of, not in lieu of, decision making. Now just think about that for a minute. All of us have been involved in somewhat extracurricular activities, let's say whether it's a school board or school district or a church or any other sort of organization where we've served on committees. Have you ever noticed that many of those committees seem to have an endless string of meetings without ever coming to any hard decisions? In a business setting, that simply is not efficient or effective. We must make decisions, and so we deliberate for the purpose of supporting decision making. And that is the second step: decide. Now, if you'll look at the bullet points underneath this step, again in your graphic, you'll see that there are some key components of this step. First of all, we must at this stage select the process that we're going to focus on. Remember, in deliberate, we invited people to come to the table with the processes that they believe we need to address, the ones that they think need to be changed. We've got to select. Look, we can change all of the processes. No question about that. We just can't change them all at the same time, right? So we've got to select which one are we going to focus on. Now, you have 2 options available to you as a leader where selecting the process on which to focus is concerned. One, you can select it yourself, and oftentimes that's the appropriate thing for you to do. As the person at the head of the table, the facilitator of this process, you make the decision. Probably be a good idea at the beginning of deliberation to let the participants know that that's how you're going to move forward, that you'll be making the decision. The other option available to you, of course, is to delegate decision-making authority to someone who is participating in the process with you. The only thing I would say about that is while there are tremendous benefits of delegation, it needs to be done judiciously. You need to be convinced that the person to whom you're delegating the authority to make this decision is best suited to do that. And the consequences of a bad decision aren't so dire that organizational survival would be placed at risk. The first thing we do is we make a decision here with regard to which process we're going to focus on. Second, we need to define success. And all I mean by that is, what are we going to be able to do as an organization after we've made this change that we're not able to do now? If we go back to deliberate, we ask people to come to the table with what's, whys, and hows. The whys were the rationale they had, the benefits they thought we would enjoy by making the change they suggested. That's all I'm saying here. Define success. What are the benefits we're going to enjoy as a result of making this change? And finally, the third component of decide, and the key component, is create actionable plans. Man, make a mark by that or something. Create actionable plans. And I've got a real simple question that you and your associates need to answer in order to determine whether or not you've got an actionable plan. Who'll do what by when? If you and your associates who are participating in this process with you can't answer that question, you've got no plan. And if you've got no plan, dear friends, the likelihood of the step number 3, implementation, happening are slim and none. Let's look at the action items for this lesson. If you haven't begun facilitating this collaborative process with others yet, then I suggest you continue to work through each of these 4 steps in our model as a leadership team or as an individual if you're going through this by yourself. 2, after selecting a process that you believe should be improved, I want you to complete the following steps on your own. 4 steps. 1, describe one specific change you would make to that process. 2, Identify the ways that change would impact your organization's performance, would contribute to organizational success. Number 3, describe the benefits you would expect to derive from making that change, you being your organization. And number 4, create a list of the steps that you believe would be necessary to make that change, the people most appropriate for completing each of those steps, and a rough time frame for their beginning and completing those steps. Remember, I am encouraging you to facilitate a collaborative process with members of your staff to expand and enhance their engagement in this process. At this stage of the program, I'm encouraging you to work through these steps yourself before you invite them to the table. When we get to the point, as we will in the next lesson, when we get to the point where you're actually functioning as a facilitator, it's important for you to remember your job is not to share with them or sell them on the things you've come up with, but to solicit their input. I just want you to work through it yourself first to gain some appreciation for how the process will play out when you bring them to the table. And that's where we're going to go in our next lesson.